Everything that rises must fall. And in the quiet teachings of Zen, we are reminded that nothing, no matter how intense, how heavy, how endless it may seem, lasts forever. For life itself is a flowing stream, never pausing, never fixed. And it is in this truth that we find our greatest source of peace, not through resisting the movement of time, but by surrendering to it, by letting ourselves float with the current instead of fighting upstream. And so the first thing that always passes is pain, though it may visit with the strength of a storm, darkening the skies of our heart, wrapping our minds in sorrow and confusion. Still it moves, still it changes, still it dissolves, because no feeling, no matter how deep, is permanent, and even the heaviest sorrow softens with time. Even the sharpest ache grows dull. And if we sit with it, breathing, witnessing, not running, not judging, it transforms, it teaches, it completes its purpose and leaves. And we are changed not because we escaped it, but because we allowed it to flow through us. And this is the wisdom of impermanence, that even in our suffering, there is movement, and in movement, there is hope. For what hurts today may heal tomorrow, and what feels endless now will one day be only memory. And the second thing that always passes is joy. The bright moments, the gentle laughter, the warmth of connection, the pleasure of success. For though we cherish them, and though they lift our spirits, they too are temporary. And Zen does not ask us to hold on tightly to happiness, but to witness it fully while it's here, and let it go when it fades, like watching a sunrise that must eventually become day, or a flower that blooms and must eventually fall. For clinging to joy, to people, to outcomes, is a quiet cause of suffering, but in allowing each joy to visit and leave in its own time, we honor it more deeply, we feel it more purely, and we become less afraid of its passing. For joy does not disappear forever. It returns like breath, like seasons, like waves, and the more we trust its rhythm, the more peaceful we become in its absence. And then there is the third thing that always passes, identity, the image of ourselves that we build, protect, defend, and project. For we are not who we were 10 years ago, or 5, or even yesterday. And yet we often grasp tightly to stories about who we are, our roles, our status, our struggles. And Zen gently reminds us that even this is not fixed, that the self is not a solid stone, but a ripple on water, shaped by time, shaped by experience, never truly still. And in recognizing this, we free ourselves from the need to always be someone, to always prove something, and we begin to live more lightly, more freely, less entangled in ego, more attuned to being. And so pain passes, joy passes, the self passes, and while this may seem unsettling at first, it is in fact the ground of our peace. For if everything passes, then we can endure anything. We can release our fears. We can meet each moment with soft eyes and an open heart, knowing it is only a visitor, not a prison. And as we continue to walk this path, we find that the less we cling, the more we receive. That true freedom is not found in holding on, but in letting go. And what remains when all else passes is presence, is awareness, is the quiet center that watches it all come and go, without being broken. And this presence is not something we create. It is something we return to again and again, through breath, through stillness, through silence, through surrender. And so we sit, we watch, we breathe, we let the waves of life rise and fall, not needing to fix them, not needing to stop them, simply being with them, trusting that what feels permanent is only passing through, and in that trust, we discover the unshakable peace that lies beneath the changing surface of all things. You know, sometimes life feels like it's going to stay a certain way forever. when we're in the middle of pain, when our hearts are heavy, or our minds are tangled, it can feel like we'll never come out the other side. But if we sit quietly, even for a little while, we begin to see something very simple, something deeply true. Everything changes, always. And that's not just a poetic saying. It's the foundation of how things really are. Zen teaches us to look at life as it is, not as we wish it to be. And what it shows us again and again is that nothing stays the same. What feels unbearable right now won't feel the same a week from now, or a year from now, or even an hour from now, if you give it space. And so today, let's just sit together and remember three things that will always pass, no matter how permanent they may seem. The first is emotional pain. When we're caught in sadness, in anger, in anxiety, it can feel like the only truth. It fills the space around us, takes over our thoughts, makes us believe this is just who we are now. But if we don't fight it, if we don't feed it or try to bury it, if we just sit with it, watch it, breathe with it, it begins to shift. Slowly at first, then more clearly. Like clouds drifting across the sky, feelings move. They change shape. They dissolve. That tightness in the chest, that heat in the face, that trembling in the hands. It's not forever. It's just a moment passing through your body. It doesn't define you. It doesn't own you. It's like a wave rising and falling. You are the ocean, not the wave. The second thing that always passes is failure. We all stumble. We fall short. We mess up. We make mistakes we wish we could take back. And so we begin to live with softer hands, not gripping so tightly to anything, not trying to force the world into the shape we once believed it had to be. And in this loosening, we gain something much greater than control. We gain peace, the kind of peace that does not depend on outcomes, the kind that is here, even when things are uncertain, even when we don't have answers, because Zen doesn't ask us to figure everything out. It just invites us to be with what is, and the more we accept the impermanence of life, the less afraid we become. Because what can you fear when you understand that everything passes, even fear itself? And slowly, you begin to see the truth behind each moment, the stillness that holds all the movement, the silence beneath the noise. And in that realization, there's a deep exhale, a letting go of the constant inner tension, a dropping of the armor we carry through so much of our lives. And then, without fanfare, we begin to experience the world differently. We begin to see the space in things, the space between thoughts, the space between words, the space between emotions. And in that space is our freedom. In that space is the choice to respond instead of react, to soften instead of harden, to be present instead of escaping. And presence, that quiet miracle, brings with it a joy that's not based on excitement or thrill, but on something far more stable. A joy that says yes to this moment, just as it is. And from that place, we stop running. We stop needing to chase happiness or flee discomfort. And instead, we root ourselves in now, where all things come and go, and where we can finally breathe with life, not against it. And we see more clearly that even the hardest days are just passing weather, and even our identities, the stories we hold so tightly, who we think we are, who we think we must be, those too dissolve in the light of awareness, and what's left is not nothing, but something deeper, something real, something wordless, that doesn't need to prove itself, that just is. And maybe that's what we've been searching for all along. Not a life free from change, but a heart that's open enough to meet change without being shattered by it. A heart that knows how to sit with both beginnings and endings, with both joy and sorrow, with both certainty and doubt, and say yes to all of it. And in saying yes to all of it, we begin to notice the subtle beauty of life that was always here, but often hidden behind our resistance to what is. We see how a quiet morning carries its own kind of peace, how a single breath can remind us of our aliveness, how the simple act of noticing the light through a tree, the sound of water, the pause between thoughts, can awaken us to something far deeper than the constant noise of wanting. This is where Zen lives, not in some distant mountaintop, not in grand declarations of wisdom, but in the ordinary, in the fleeting, in the space where we simply are. And as we live more closely to this truth, we no longer need everything to be permanent, to feel safe. We don't need things to last in order to love them. In fact, we love more deeply because we know they won't last. We cherish more fully because we understand the temporary nature of every moment, every person, every breath. And that tenderness, born from the knowledge that all things pass, is what opens the heart, softens the mind, and anchors the soul. And so even when pain returns, we are no longer afraid of it. We see it for what it is, a wave. It may be large, it may be strong, but we have seen waves before, and we know how to stand still as it moves through us. Even when joy arrives, we welcome it without needing it to stay forever. We bow to it, grateful for its visit, and ready to release it when it's time to go. Even when we feel lost, uncertain of who we are or where we're going, we remember that the self, too, is impermanent. And in that remembering, we find a deeper ground, not the shifting story of who we think we are, but the quiet witness beneath it, the open sky in which all our experiences come and go. And maybe that's the greatest gift Zen offers us. Not answers, not certainty, but spaciousness, the space to allow life to be exactly as it is, without needing it to be any other way. And in that space, we find ourselves not chasing after peace, but simply resting in it, because peace was never missing. It was only waiting, beneath the noise, beneath the grasping, beneath the need for permanence, to be seen, to be felt, to be lived. And in that quiet resting, something inside us changes, not all at once, but gently, like the way dawn arrives, not with a crash, but with light slowly spilling over the edge of the world. We begin to meet life with fewer expectations and more curiosity, with less resistance and more compassion. And that compassion begins within, toward the parts of us we once judged, the fears we once pushed away, the past versions of ourselves we carried shame for. Zen does not ask us to become perfect. It asks us to be present, and that includes being present with our imperfections, with our contradictions, with our humanness, because even those things are part of the passing stream. And when we stop trying to fix ourselves and instead sit with ourselves, we find something even more powerful than change: acceptance. Not resignation, not passivity, but a deep honoring of what is, and through that honoring, we grow. Slowly, naturally, without force. And life becomes less about reaching some final destination, and more about walking this very step, breathing this very breath, experiencing this moment as it unfolds. We stop waiting for the perfect feeling, the perfect relationship, the perfect version of ourselves, and instead, we begin to notice the wonder of what's already here. A sip of warm tea, the rustle of leaves, a single bird call in the early morning. These things were never small. We just weren't quiet enough to hear them. And in listening, truly listening, we realize that happiness doesn't come from controlling life, but from flowing with it, from knowing that everything, our joys, our struggles, our identities, our relationships, are always in motion. And if they're in motion, then we don't have to cling to them. We can let them be what they are. Let them change. Let them go. and we can keep walking lightly, gently, awake. And this is the quiet revolution that Zen brings, not a dramatic transformation, but the simple radical act of being at peace with impermanence, the simple radical act of sitting still as the world moves, of trusting that we do not need to hold on to anything to be whole, that who we are is not defined by what we keep, but by what we're willing to meet with open hands, even if it doesn't stay, especially if it doesn't stay. And so we begin to understand that even endings are not as final as they seem, that what feels like the closing of one chapter is often the quiet preparation for something new, something unseen, something still ripening in the dark. And we realize that even the hardest moments, the ones we thought would break us, have instead softened us, deepened us, rooted us more fully in the present. Because now, we are no longer waiting for life to become something else, before we can love it, before we can trust it, before we can rest in it. And this is the great freedom that arises when we embrace the truth that everything passes. We no longer run from pain. We no longer chase joy. We no longer cling to an identity that must stay frozen in time. Instead, we live like the sky, vast, open, unbothered by the clouds that move across it. And when we live like the sky, we make room for everything. We make room for grief without drowning in it, for happiness without fearing its loss, for uncertainty without needing to control it. And this is not weakness. This is strength, the kind of strength that flows, the kind that bends but does not break, because it knows how to let go, how to begin again, how to trust what it cannot predict. And maybe that is the heart of Zen, not learning how to escape life, but learning how to live fully within it, how to meet each moment with eyes open, hands soft, breath steady, and spirit still, knowing that this moment too is part of the great passing, that this thought, this feeling, this phase, this day, this lifetime is only here for a short time, and that nothing, no experience, no state of mind, no success or failure, or sorrow or joy can ever define who we truly are, because who we are is not the passing, but the awareness beneath the passing, the presence that remains as everything else moves through it. And in knowing this, we are no longer so easily shaken. We become calm, not because life becomes easy, but because we no longer expect it to be permanent, and we stop asking it to be. And in that space, in that freedom from grasping, a quiet smile returns to our face, the kind that doesn't need a reason, the kind that comes from simply being alive, here, now, breathing. And we remember that we don't need to understand everything to trust the flow of life. We don't need to control the current to float within it. And when we forget, and we will, we can always return to this breath, this moment, this truth, that all things pass, even the forgetting. And in returning again and again, we discover that true peace is not a place we arrive, but a presence we allow, a presence that has always been here, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the craving, a presence that holds all things and asks for nothing in return but our attention, our stillness, our willingness to simply be just as we are, in this ever-changing, ever-passing, ever-beautiful now. If this message brought you calm, this space is always here for you. Subscribe, return, and walk this quiet path with us, one breath at a time. Until next time, remember, nothing is forever except change.